Welcome to NewYorkTrue.com. I'm John Kenny, and today we're going to spend 5 minutes with Gina Raimondo. Gina Raimondo is the Rhode Island State Treasurer. As State Treasurer, she oversees Rhode Island's state pension funds. When Gina took office in January of 2011, those pension funds faced a grave crisis, even deeper than New York's. How she led the way in resolving that crisis is a story that all New Yorkers should hear.
When I came into office, I inherited a system that was 48% funded. We had a $7 billion unfunded liability, which was just about the highest unfunded liability per capita of any state in the country. And our actuaries were telling us that if we didn't make changes, the fund could be out of money in 25, 30 years. And very importantly, we were spending about 10% of our state tax revenue into the pension. And if we hadn't reformed the system, that 10% would have doubled to 20% next year. Clearly, I'm not the first person to come along in Rhode Island and say we have a pension problem. In fact, the General Assembly, to its credit, had done some pension reform a few years ago. Having said that, I don't think people understood why it mattered to them, which is to say, I think we were probably the first people to explain to the public and explain to the unions and explain to the General Assembly that if we didn't fix this pension, it was going to crowd out spending for so many other valuable public services. And it was making that link that I think was probably a new way of talking about an old issue. I think there were really two key components of that process. The first was just talking about the problem for months before offering a solution. So for months, I simply went around the state and talked about the consequences to the people of Rhode Island of not fixing the system. So just how high their property taxes would go, just how underfunded our schools and buses and institutions of higher education would be if we didn't fix the pension. Kind of just let people chew on the fact that there would be consequences for every single Rhode Islander if we didn't fix the pension. And the other thing was we took a tone of no finger pointing, no blame, no nasty divisive rhetoric. In fact, my mantra was, this is math, not politics. And from the beginning and throughout, we said, this is not going to devolve into us versus them, Democrat versus Republican, union versus management. We very much always said, this is in everybody's best interest to fix this problem. It's a challenging issue. And in fact, I spent all last summer going into crowded, sometimes angry union halls and taking my message to the very people who were being asked to sacrifice. And, justifiably, these people, state social workers, teachers, etc., they were angry. And what I said to them was, look, I wish I weren't here telling you this. I wish the system weren't broken. I wish I had a better message. But I'm not going to lie to you. These are the facts. Let's get together and fix it. And so I think that, yes, it was that spirit of public education, bringing everybody together. Let's focus on a solution and tone down the anger. It absolutely sustained us. I'll tell you that when the bill passed, the pension reform bill, passed in the Senate by a vote of 36-2, and in the House by a vote of 57-15. So in about a year, our state went from, when I first took office, people said, don't touch the issue, it's political suicide, you're never going to get it done, it's too difficult. Well, a year later, after a robust public conversation, nearly unanimous vote in the Senate. I think that the approach we chose, public education, focus on the problem, math not politics, is an approach that would prevail with respect to any fiscal problem in any state as big as New York or as small as Rhode Island. I think it's the job of public policy leaders and public officials to make the case to the people. And the way to do that is to communicate and to cut through whatever special interest groups there are and whatever politics there is and get straight to the people and educate the people. Once people understand the consequences to them and their families and their children of not fixing a problem, they will engage. And that was the turning point of the pension. It got to a point where people said, I don't have a pension, but I know if I don't call my legislator and ask them to pass this reform, my property taxes are going up $1,000 next year. Or my child who goes to that public school isn't going to have middle school sports next year because they're going to be cut. And that's that magical moment when the person says, I better do something about it. And they pick up the phone and they call the legislator, and then the legislator says, if I'm going to get reelected, I'm going to do what my constituents want.